get started. Let me get our slideshow going for us. And hopefully all of you will be able to see. Awesome. So you should see a federal program Coffee Chats PowerPoint slide now. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm really excited about you joining us today. This is our first monthly Federal Programs Coffee Chat. So if some of you have been with us for a while, remember we used to have first Friday webinars. So now we're having coffee chats each month. So I hope you have your coffee. I had planned for us to talk for about 2 hours. We have a lot on the agenda today that we're going to be discussing. So I hope you've grabbed yourself a cup of coffee or a soda or something, and you are able to just relax, sit back in your office, or if you're in your home or wherever you are today, and we can have some time to just talk through some federal programs, information for the upcoming school year. I found this quote when I was working on our PowerPoint, and I thought it was perfect to start out our conversations today. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. I think it's very important that as we gather together every month, that we do view these as conversations. I know there's going to be a lot of training opportunities, and we'll be giving you a lot of information, but we also want to have participation. So today there's a lot of information that I want to give you, but please feel free to type in the chat box any questions, any comments. If you hear something you like, give us a smiley face, some kind of feedback, because it is often very hard to do online, especially for me, because I'm a people person and I love to see your faces and talk to you, and all I see is a computer screen with our PowerPoint on it right now. So feel free to join in and be actively engaged in our conversations. I hope that these monthly conversations really will be impactful and meaningful, and we can have the type of conversation that really matters and really changes things. So I'm excited to share some things that I think are going to be really important to student achievement with you this year. Okay, so our August agenda, we have lots of stuff on our agenda today. So we're going to review and talk about the tiered level of monitoring and support. I think you're all going to give tons of smiley faces for number 2. This is a epicenter due date document that I created for you all. So it has all of your tasks for the entire year for each of the programs that I work with. All of those have already been scheduled. So we'll do a deep dive into that so that you'll have everything in advance this year. We're going to do a little bit of a review from our federal programs finance boot camp last week, just to talk about reimbursement, a couple of reminders, and give you a chance to ask any questions since you've been working with it now. We're also going to talk a little bit about McKinney-Vento and homeless funds and what that looks like. We have a new amendment form and some new amendment due dates this year that I'll share with you. I'll give you an update on fifth day counts. And then after we finish with number 6, we're going to move into some items on the agenda that are more specific to Title I schools, but the rest of you are welcome to stay on board with us, stay online, because I'm truly excited to introduce number 7 today to our Title I schools. But again, any school can be involved in this if you want to. It's best practice. It's a really good opportunity to find out how our students are truly being impacted by federal funds. But again, I'm kind of piloting this with our Title I schools, and I'm excited to introduce that, but the rest of you are welcome to stay on board with us. And then 8 and 9, we're going to look at Title I, annual Title I meetings. It's that time of year, and we'll dig into some other parent and family engagement opportunities. So again, the rest of you are welcome to join us, even if you're not a Title I school, for numbers 7, 8, and 9. Welcome to stay on the line, because there's a lot of really good best practice, whether you're a Title I school or not. Okay, so just a couple of reminders before we get started. If you are joining us today via phone or via computer, if you'll remember to mute yourself so that we don't hear a lot of background noise. That's always really helpful. We're going to give you opportunities today throughout the presentation, throughout each of these different sections, to ask questions. And at that point, if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question or make a comment or share an idea, welcome you to do that. Or you can type in in the chat box. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you the way my setup is, I cannot see the chat box for some reason. So we have Takia on the line, and I introduced Takia to you through our federal programs newsletter. And last a couple months ago when we had some planning meetings, but Takia Jackson Noble is our federal programs assistant. So Takia is going to read out those questions for us and keep an eye on those. And she may interrupt me occasionally to say, hey, hold on, we have a question. So that's great. So just type in your comments or ideas or anything you want to in those chat boxes. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the purpose of us gathering together each month to have coffee, sit back, relax a little bit, have a reason to go into your office and close the door away from everyone. But there's lots of reasons. And one, obviously, is to provide up-to-date information and news regarding compliance and all of those federal programs you see listed there. Currently, I work in my office with Title 1, 2, 4. Notice that I skipped 3 because that's been moved over to someone else in our office who is an amazing contact when it comes to working with Title 3. But again, if you have questions, I'll be happy to help you and then refer you over to who is working with that now. I also work with homeless, foster care, CSI, ATSI, which are some of our priority schools funding opportunities, and then also ESSER. Another reason for us to gather together is to provide resources and support to ensure that you stay in compliance, but also assist you in helping to meet the needs of your students. The past couple of years, this is the year 3 for me with our charter school district. And in the past couple of years, we have spent a lot of time making sure that we know what it is that we're supposed to be doing and then making sure that we're doing it. And it really paid off, especially in the area of Title I. We had a 0 finding audit. We also received accommodations from the State Department in a lot of the work that we're doing. So you guys have just knocked it out of the park the last couple of years. And I'm so proud of you and the work you're doing. You're going to see some things today that are going to take us even further and move us beyond compliance to really looking at student achievement and how we use our federal funds to meet the needs of our students and whether or not it's really making a difference. But also another reason is I really want us to open opportunities and create additional opportunities for our schools to collaborate together and within programs so that we're sharing ideas and we don't feel isolated out there in silos working along. So I'm hoping this will be a good opportunity to share ideas. I've already asked Hannah Keever, I think she's on the line. I think she sent me an email today. I know she's going to be popping in and out because they're doing some testing, but she's going to share something along the lines of Title I annual meetings when we get to that part today. And then if anybody else has ideas to share, I'd love for you to do that as well.
And then Tracy, I got a question. When does a school get a Title I designation? Like what time of year? Is that
okay? We're gonna get into all that stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, just hold on to those questions until we get. I know I did tell you could interrupt me, but we'll get to the question slide and then we can answer some of those. Okay. So hopefully our training today is going to answer a lot of your questions. So save that one for me. Okay. But another reason for us to have this coffee chat is to provide a refresher for a lot of our experienced school leaders and coordinators, but then also training opportunities for new training opportunities for some of our new school leaders and coordinators. So with that said, I want to share something with you. Recently, I sent out a survey to all of our schools asking for our school leader experience and some of our coordinators experience levels. One of the reasons I asked for that is because of the monitoring and support document I'm going to show you later. But I wanted to share this with you so that we could just have an overall look at the experience levels of the folks working with our federal programs. So when we look at our school leader experience, we can see the green represents that the school leader has 3 or more years experience working in a charter school. So we have a lot of experience. I mean, just under half of our school leaders have 3 years or more working as a school leader. So they have a lot of experience to share. But with that said, we also have more than half who have completed 2 years or less in a charter schools. So I know we have newer folks who are learning and would love to gain knowledge from our experienced school leaders. When we look at our Title I coordinators, and I didn't put Title 1, 2, 4, and all of the other coordinators there because most of those folks, most of our Title I and Title II coordinators in each of our schools actually handle a lot of the federal programs. So if you're the Title I coordinator, you usually have Title II and Title IV assigned to you. But I just wanted you to see, we have a lot of new school leaders, new Title I coordinators. So 48%, little under half of our coordinators are very new to federal programs. So this is a great opportunity for us to, again, share those ideas, have a nice refresher for a lot of our folks who are new, and just continue to learn from each other. So I thought you might be interested in those percentages. Title II, notice it's pretty even there across the board. So that kind of gives me an idea as well regarding how much information I want to give you. Do I treat you as a brand new coordinator or a brand new school leader, or is it a nice refresher? So I feel like I feel comfortable going in depth with some of the things that you all need to know, since we have so many new folks join us, or folks with experience, less than 3 years experience. I also wanted to show you what our school leaders and coordinators really want to know about this year. So I gave you a couple of options to choose from on the survey, and it looks like you want to know about everything. So I'm excited to hear that you all want to know about the federal funding impact on student achievement. The rest of that's missing there, but it's that has to do with student achievement. So we're going to talk about that today. Let me go back up. We're going to look at some compliance issues. We're going to talk about parent-family engagement. We're going to talk about reimbursement submissions. And the other, interestingly enough, was from some of our newer folks who just really wanted to learn from each other. So excited about the results and understanding that you really want to know about these things. So with all of that said, let us begin our adventure, our first coffee chat of the year. And I do look at this as an adventure. I feel like we've all been on an adventure, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. This pandemic has really sent us on adventures into the world of the unknown. So we're going to jump right in and start talking about our tiered level of monitoring and support for the district. As an LEA, which is a district, we have to create some type of monitoring instrument to determine how our schools are doing. The past couple of years, you have seen me visit your schools. We've done a lot of, especially with our Title I schools, site visits. I've conducted a lot of site visits at the Title I schools. I've done a lot of online technical assistance with all of our schools. A lot of it face-to-face, over the phone, but much of it has come in the form of training opportunities. So now that we are in the know, I guess you could say, I feel very comfortable with where we are. We know what we're supposed to do, and we've been doing it. We're implementing this tiered level of monitoring and support. And so let me explain to you the purpose of this. This tiered level of monitoring and support is going to give an opportunity for me to provide professional development and technical assistance to all of you in the area of federal compliance. And so you might be wondering, what are the expectations? Well, as a school who receives federal funding, you're all expected to follow the rules and regulations as set forth by ESSA and also EDGAR. So I have to have a way of monitoring all of our schools throughout the year to ensure that you are meeting those expectations. Once our conversation is done today, I will direct you to a link for this PowerPoint, so you will have all of the links and everything that you need. We've updated the website. I spent a lot of time this summer updating our website so that all of the resources you need are right at your fingertips. I'll show you that a little later. But hopefully this link will be a great resource to you to understand what we're doing through this monitoring and support process. Okay, so it's also going to give me an opportunity to determine how to support you. Some of our schools are, we have newer school leaders, newer coordinators. They may be a brand new school, and they need a lot more support than some of our other schools that have, been around for a while and they've been doing a great job and they don't really need as much support. And this obviously is going to change from year to year. So this particular system is going to help me determine how to best meet your needs and how to best support you. Keep in mind that regardless of what your rating is on the rubric I'm about to show you, you can always call me, you can always email me, and I'm happy to help support you in any way I can. I pride myself on providing high quality technical assistance to you guys, and that will not stop regardless of where you fall on this particular rubric, okay? So this is what the rubric looks like. I introduced it to you all last spring. Excuse me. Yes, it was last spring. So a few months ago. And I showed you all the different areas that we were going to be monitoring and what it means in each one of those, for each one of those tiers. So notice that a tier 1 is a no risk school. A tier 2 is a school that may have low risk, but there's still some risk there. And then we have a tier 3 that is a high risk school. The green areas on the left, you can see, are the areas that we will be looking at. So timely submissions. These are all of those submissions in Epicenter. Things like your applications, your any documentation that's due as part of an audit process, or anything that we collect on a yearly basis that has a time to it. So you can see you could receive a tier 1 in this particular section if you're always on time, if you're 90 to 90% on time, 90 to 99% on time, you would fall in category 2 there. And if you are below 90%, then that could possibly put you in the high risk category. I won't go through each one of these because you guys can read it out, but the other areas are accurate submissions. So when you do submit those particular documents that are due or your applications, are they accurate? Do we have to go back and forth a lot of time and spend, weeks and weeks and weeks trying to get things right? Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because I want you to be able to work with me and us be able to go back and forth and me to be able to help you. But sometimes we look at some of those just like you would your students, and you're thinking, okay, 3 or 4 rejections, okay, they're kind of low risk, they might need a little more help. 5 or more rejections because the documents are incorrect, then that might put you at a little higher risk of not meeting expectations. So the other areas would be the monitoring that the South Carolina Department of Education does. Those would be audit findings and technical assistance. Everyone received a tier 1 in this particular area because we did the only audit that we have results from at this particular time in the programs that I work with would be our Title I audit, and we had 0 findings. So everyone fell in this category. The SCPCSD monitoring is the monitoring that we do each year. So when I'm visiting your school and looking through for example, the Title I checklist and things like that, those are the types of auditing that would come, or monitoring that would come from our district. We're also looking at your expenditures and your reimbursement requests. If we see a lot of rejections, that might mean that you need a little more help than others. And so that helps to show us where you might fall with the types of support you need. Area of concern letters, those are official. When we see some issues, we send out area of concern letters, and those are pretty official. So you can see the different categories there. If you receive 1 letter, that puts you at low risk, but evidently some risk. 2 or more areas, we need to be really concerned, and that puts you at a higher risk. These 2 areas may seem unfair if you're thinking about what risk your school falls into, but keep in mind that this helps us. One of the reasons we do this is to help you and to support you in learning all the processes and making sure you're in compliance and so forth. So any of our school leaders that fall 3 or more years as a coordinator, as a school leader, you're going to fall in a tier 1. If you have 2 years or less, then you're going to fall in the risk 2. And then our brand new schools, school leaders, and if you have a coordinator who is less than 1 year experience, you're going to fall into this higher risk because you need more support and more training. This particular slide is going to show you what it means to be in each one of these categories. In other words, what are my responsibilities? What is the district going to do once the district has determined which one of these tiers our school falls into? So if you're a no-risk school, and that's a tier 1, then you're going to continue to submit all of your required documentation in a timely manner. If you need a site visit, I'm happy to come, but I'm not going to require that I come to visit your school. But you're welcome to request if you're just looking into something and you said, hey, I just really want you to come check and see how we're doing. I'm happy to do that, but it's not required. And you're going to love this one. Attendance is optional at federal programs training. So most of the time, these are mandatory for our schools. But if you're doing well and there's no risk, then we get it. You got it. You're good. You don't need to spend 2 hours talking to me monthly, right? So you don't have to attend, but you're welcome to if you would like to continue doing that. All of our monthly trainings are going to be recorded as well, so you can also go back and listen to those recordings. Tier 2, again, continue to submit all of your required documentation in a timely manner. If you have any areas of non-compliance that have been identified by the State Department of Education audit or by any individual monitoring visits, then I will more than likely ask you to submit those documents to the district at least 1 week prior to the deadline, so that if there are some problems, then you have some time to straighten it out and work on that, and we have time to work together and for me to provide that support that you need to be able to be successful. Also, site visits. If you are a tier 2 school, you're going to receive at least 1 site visit per year. It may be virtual. Most of ours probably will be virtual because we don't have any major issues from any of our schools with non-compliance because, of course, especially our Title I, because we received a zero finding audit. So that's good news. I will say also, we're going to have monthly check-ins with all of our tier 2 schools. And so you'll probably see that some of our site visits, our virtual site visits, are going to take place during some of our monthly check-ins. So we're going to check in monthly just to chit chat. This may be a 10-minute conversation. It may be an hour-long conversation, depending on what your needs are and what questions you have and how you need me to support you. And I skipped this one. Attendance is mandatory at all federal program trainings. Again, a lot of those are going to be virtual and they're going to be recorded so that you could look at them at a later date if you needed to, if you have some scheduling conflicts. If you are a high-risk school, we have very few of those, but if you are, you're going to continue to submit all required documentation. You're going to have to submit your documents at least a month prior to the deadline when possible, so that we can really spend a lot of time going through what you've submitted and helping you to refine it. 2 site visits a year, and we're going to do those on site if possible. We obviously know in our current situation, we don't know if that's always possible, but depending on circumstances, we will do that. Attendance is mandatory at all federal programs trainings, and instead of monthly check-ins, we're going to have weekly check-ins just to make sure you're on track. So I hope you all see this as not a gotcha type opportunity, but as an opportunity to build success and continue to support and help you through this program. So I wanted to show you what my tracking document looks like to determine where your particular school may fall. And I blacked out these schools over here because I'm sure you don't want everybody knowing where you are, and I understand that completely. But I wanted you to see my tracking document has the areas at the top that we are looking at. Those are all the areas that I showed you on the rubric a few moments ago. And then it has an area to show you how the category was determined. Like, what did I use to determine whether you're a 1, 2, or 3? So for timely submissions, I have tracking forms for all of our documents that you submit. So I looked at, in particular, I looked at your Title I and Title II audit documents from this past year, and whether you submitted those on time. And I also looked at Title I, II, and IV application tracking forms and whether those were those applications were submitted on time. I also looked at those same documents to see if the documents you submitted were accurate for Title I and Title II audit, and then also for the applications. Again, here, everyone received a 1. If you see an NA, it means that school was not with us during that time. They did not have to participate in those audits. But again, in this particular case, it didn't matter because all of our schools received a 1 because we had no audit findings from the South Carolina Department of Ed in those programs where we received results. Expenditures and reimbursements, I have a tracking form. I should say we have a tracking form now that we have Takia on board to help with reimbursement reviews. And so I went back and looked at those tracking forms to see how many times a submission was rejected. And we also have, of course, have Epicenter that we can go back and look at as well. Official area of concern letters, those are documented through email. And then these 2 areas, the program coordinator experience and the school leader experience, were documented using that federal program survey. So you can see here, this is just a sampling. Here is a school that is brand new, and they have a new program coordinator. They also have a new school leader. Actually, those are the same. That's the same person for this particular school. So they had no other way for us to give them a number in these other categories because they were not here. This automatically, if you're a brand new school, you're automatically going to be at a level 3 because you're going to need a lot of support, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, so I want you to understand that. Most of our schools fall at a level 2. I'm going to share those statistics with you in just a moment because I know you're wondering, how do we compare with all the other schools? But you can see here this example. It varies. There's a 1 in timely submissions. There's a 3, which is that level 3 needing more support in accurate submissions. So although they're all submitted on time, there's a lot of back and forth helping you to get that document correct. And then same thing with expenditures and reimbursement. You may be submitting them monthly, but then you have a lot of rejections that we need to work on and make sure that you understand what documentation is needed and what you need to do to not have those rejections. But in this case, you can see in all the cases, actually, I took the average of all of the scores to get a final score. So it's based on the average of those 8 categories. Okay. Even in this example, you can see here that we had a school that received a 2, which is the low risk in timely submissions and accurate submissions, but they had a 1 in everything else. So their average came out to a 1, which makes them a no risk school. Okay. Okay, so if you're wondering where do we fall once we get our results, how do we compare with all the other schools? I did a little pie graph or a pie chart here to show you all of our schools and then one just looking at our Title I schools. So these are all of your results from 1920, which translates into the support you receive and the monitoring you receive for the upcoming school year, which is 2021. So you can see here, yellow represents our low risk schools. So when we look at all of our schools together, 64% of our schools fall into low risk, which is awesome. We have 30% that fall into tier 1, which is no risk, so that's great. And then we have 6% of our schools that fall into the high risk category, which translates into 2 schools. So we have 2 schools that are needing additional support simply because of some areas of concern. Okay. When we look at our Title I schools, Title I schools usually receive the most federal funding. So that's why I wanted to show a comparison here. The majority of our Title II schools fall at tier 2, and then we have only 7% at a tier 1 and 7% at a tier 3. So most of you are falling in this category 2, which is the low risk category. And again, most of our schools altogether are in that category as well. So let me show you what this is going to look like for you. After our meeting today, after our coffee chat today, I'm going to continue to work on these. I haven't quite finished them yet, but you're going to receive a rubric with your results. So this is the rubric that you saw a few minutes ago. The only difference is that there's a box that we can check to show which category you fell in. So if I had a school, it may be called Sweet Academy of Learning, and this gives you an example of where I fail. So I've got a tier 1 here, tier 3 here, and so forth. And then the bottom of the page is going to show you where you fall. So in this particular case, my Sweet Academy of Learning has fallen in a category, a tier 2 category. So I've listed that here, and then I've put some comments there to show what that means. You're going to attend all federal programs trainings, attend monthly check-ins, and receive a site visit at least once during the year. So it gives you an opportunity to sign it and date it and send it back to me to let me know that you're good to go with all of this. So keep in mind, this is not to say, hey, we've got schools not doing well. It's not a gotcha. This is an opportunity for us to know which schools need the most support and how we support them. So this is our first year implementing this. So I do appreciate your feedback. I appreciate any suggestions that you may have, and we may monitor and adjust this as we move forward to next year. All right, what questions do you have so far about the monitoring and support?
I had a Marine who said, is this like the SPED system? I'm not sure.
That's a great question, Takia and Marie. It's very similar. We kind of worked together, and I looked at some of their documents that they had created. So it's very similar to SPEDS, but it's more specific, obviously, to our federal programs.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
And then Miss Tamika asked, when will we get the information on our level?
Oh, good question, Tamika. I'm still working on the rubrics. I have all of your levels ready on a tracking document. I'm just working on transferring that information to your rubric, and I will email that out to you. I'm hoping to have that completed by hopefully midweek next week. I'm still working on Title I revisions and Title IV applications because that's due by the end of this week. So hopefully I'll have all that to you at least by the end of next week. Okay. All right, great questions. Anybody else?
That's all I have.
That's it. All right. Thanks, Takia, for being our host. All right. So this is exciting. The Epicenter due dates document. I hope you're going to love me and give me lots of smiley faces for this. So what we have done is to create a federal Epicenter submission due date sheet. That's a mouthful. And I want to show you what it looks like. I've heard you, and if I were in your shoes, I would want something like this as well. So the past 2 years have kind of been scattered, I guess you could say, with due dates being all over the place, not always at the same time. And that was due to the fact that we were audited my first year here and my second year here with most of our federal programs. And so we had to schedule dates to get those documents in at the time that the State Department needed them. So what we've done now, I went through and created this Excel file, and you'll see at the bottom, it's for all of our programs that I work with. I'm working with our team right now to see if we can add some of their programs in as well so that you have one document to look at. But I started with just the programs I work with. So this is a sample from the Title I tab, and you can see you'll have all of the names of each submission. So basically what this is everything you have to submit in Epicenter for each program, broken down into what the name of the submission is, what category it falls into, what the entity is, some description and instructions, which these kind of go hand in hand. Sometimes I've noticed that the instructions are under the description, but anyway, the information is there that you need. There are also links where available to assist you with whatever that particular task is. Also notice that there is a due date, and you will either have the word scheduled or unscheduled. I don't see an example on here of an unscheduled. So let me explain what that means with scheduled and unscheduled. So if it's not scheduled, that means you're not going to see that task showing up in your queue in Epicenter. Some examples of that are amendments, reimbursement requests, the notice to parents regarding teacher certification status, and there are some others that may be in there. But the reason that it's not scheduled is because not every school needs to submit that particular document at a particular time. So they may have due dates. For example, the amendments, you're going to have 3 opportunities this year to submit amendments. The first one's going to be September 15th. Not all schools will need to upload an amendment. So this saves you time. It saves me time. So you don't have to go into your queue and say, I don't have an amendment at this time. And it saves us time when we review those because, you know, we're opening documents that don't have anything in them and we're still having to do something to it, either receive it or reject it or whatever the case may be. Reimbursement requests are the same way. Not every school has reimbursement requests for every program every month because you may not have spent any money in that particular program the month before. Notice to parents regarding teacher certification status. Let's see, does that show here? No, it doesn't. But when you look at the document and you get to the notice to parents regarding teacher certification status, that due date is, if I remember correctly, 10 days after you actually send that notice to parents. So this is for our Title I schools, for those of you wondering what that is. But it's also, let me back up a minute, that is something that's supposed to go out for our other schools too, because all of our schools receive Title II funding, and that's a requirement under Title II. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to parent-family engagement. If it is a scheduled task, that means that that task will show up in two places. It's going to show up in your queue, and it's also going to show up in your calendar. I have talked to Epicenter just this week because we've had some folks who've been submitting scheduled tasks, but then it's still showing as an unmet or a requirement that you didn't meet in your Epicenter queue, I think. So I've talked to Epicenter, and they said that the reason for that is the way that you're submitting your scheduled task. So if you have a scheduled task, please go through your queue and click on it from your queue, or she said you can also click on it from your calendar to locate that submission and upload it. That way it won't count against you in compliance. Now, I did put a picture here because I have sent out some documentation periodically that shows you how to go and locate submissions or upload submissions through Document Center. So if you do happen to go through Document Center, because that's where you're going to go for all of your non-scheduled tasks, if you go through Document Center for the scheduled tasks, those things that I've scheduled in Epicenter and they're due on a particular date, you're going to want to make sure that you select the requirements. So you'll have a drop-down menu here, and this is a good example. This is the parent and family engagement policy that's due 11/16/20. You have to actually click on that particular task for it to count, I guess, for you in the compliance area. So you are actually meeting this particular requirement. If you don't put that in there, I think if you check there's like a blank box or there's some other things you can choose, then it's not going to count that you've turned it in on this date. You also have to, I just want to remind you that when you click on this, the due date is going to show up here. So you'll want to make sure you're clicking on the right thing. So you can match up the due date with what's in that Epicenter document for when it's due to make sure you're getting credit for it. Okay, so the easiest thing to do is to just go through your queue or to go through the calendar for those things that are scheduled. All right, what questions do you have about scheduled and unscheduled tasks and that document? I bet you want to know where to find it. I'm going to send you a copy of it, but I'll also share with you where to find it on the website when we get to a place where we can share resources, but I'll show you where to find everything. Okay, any other questions, Takia?
No, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, let's do a quick review of reimbursement. So what's new in the reimbursement process? I hope you're all listening carefully because we have a new cover sheet that was introduced to you last week. Finance asked us to add the detailed budget code, a place for you to put that detailed budget code, and then also a place for you to put the Smart Fusion journal entry number so that they can more easily match up what you're asking reimbursement for. And then we've added some options under the types of submissions, and I'll show you all of this in just a moment. You're going to love me for this. Well, actually, it's not me, it's finance, but you do not need to submit meal receipts anymore. Woohoo! We don't want them. I'm so excited I don't have to look at your meal receipts to make sure there's no alcohol on them. We can reimburse you based on the per diem. So that's what's usually in your plan. And so we can reimburse you based on per diem. So you no longer have to put the meal receipts in there. Documents. Our finance department asked us to remind you all to, if possible, upload all of your documents into one PDF file to save time. So you remember how you have to do one cover sheet per activity, and then you have all the supporting documentation? If it's possible, they would love for you to upload all of that documentation into one PDF document instead of having like, okay, you're uploading the cover sheet, you're uploading the, like for example, if it's payroll, the payroll sheet, you're uploading the time and effort, and then you may have 3 or 4 different documents to open. Sometimes I've had as many as 20 something documents to open, and it gets a little confusing. We want to make sure we don't lose anything in the process, but we also understand if you don't have the technical ability to scan all of that in or whatever, it's okay to continue to do it in separate uploads or separate PDF files. I also strongly recommend that you save all of your documents as PDFs, because I get a lot of Word documents from the the cover sheet. But remember, if you upload a Word document, anybody can change it, and we don't want our auditors to say that we've had any opportunities to do anything to any of your documents. So it's just always best practice when you are submitting documents to submit them in a PDF, so that it's a PDF. We can't make any changes to it, or no one can make any changes to it. So cover sheets, save those as PDFs before you upload them. There's also a new resource for you. There's something called a quick reference guide for submission type documentation. I put a link there for you, but I wanted to just remind you that you can go to that link, and it breaks down the different types of submissions. So for example, in the past year, we just had payroll there. We asked for the payroll register. I'll get it out in a minute. Payroll register, and then the time and effort that went with it. We've kind of broken that down into different types of submissions. You may have to submit a payroll register for someone who was a mentor and they received a mentor stipend. We also showed you what type of programmatic documentation is needed for that. So you'll have access to that as well. So I strongly encourage all of you to share that with your finance folks or anyone who is uploading documents for reimbursement. Okay. All right, so this just shares with you a copy of what the new cover sheet looks like. Notice that you have the budget code, and increasing it just a little bit so you can see that top. There we go. So notice that the budget code and the Smart Fusion journal entry has been added here. For that budget code, that got a little bit confusing during our conversation last week during the financial boot camp. So I want to explain that a little bit more. Normally, you might have let's say you have a 100-400. That's usually supplies and materials. Usually that budget code is broken down in your finance department into a detailed budget code. So this is where you're going to put the detailed budget code. I went back and added to all of the cover sheets detailed here so that it doesn't confuse you. This is an opportunity for you to really make sure you're connecting with your finance person to have the detailed budget code here. So whatever the detailed budget code is here, that's going to be what you enter into that Smart Fusion journal entry. Now your Smart Fusion journal entry is going to be a different number, but if it could be like if it was that 100-400, trying to think of a good example, because I don't work with finance budget codes. I work with those high level budget codes, so I can't think of an example right now. But in other words, if you have a 200-300 in your plan, it's going to be somewhere in that 200-300 category. Might be a 211, 310 or something like that. It'll be somewhere in that level. The rest of the document pretty much looks the same as you've seen before, with the exception of adding the submission type. So we have kind of broken this down. It now is a 2-page document instead of 1, which usually ends up 2 pages by the time you enter all of your information. Anyway, just want to remind you, make sure you copy the activity from the approved application. If it's something different, even if you left part of it off, it makes it hard for us to find it, and make sure we're giving you credit for the correct activity in your plan. Okay. So again, here's just an example of what the top part of your activity may look like. Notice this is a 100. Normally this would be a 100, 100, and it's broken down into a 112, 110. And I just realized I left the benefits off of this. So since you can add salary and benefits to one cover sheet for the same activity, you would have also put your budget code there for the benefits. I'm sorry, I left that off. I do not know what Fusion journal entry numbers are, but I do know they're a 6-digit number and they start with 18. So that'll help you for those of you that are coordinators and you don't work directly with Smart Fusion. This is the type of number you're looking for here under Smart Fusion. Oh, look at there. I added a circle and forgot. So I could talk about each of those. All right. Okay, here is that quick reference guide that we talked about. So I just wanted to share with you. Notice how it's broken down. Instead of just having one type of payroll, we know we have more. So it tells you the financial documentation that's required and then also the programmatic documentation that is required. I'll go ahead and tell you this was created as a result of a lot of rejections. We had, I don't even know how many rejections. I need to look it up, but hundreds of rejections. And a lot of it was because it was missing programmatic documentation. So we really strongly encourage you to look at this when you get ready to do a submission for reimbursement to ensure that you have the correct type of financial documentation and the correct type of programmatic documentation. One big change, other than the meal receipts, is that for conferences, you no longer have to submit proof of attendance. So we clarified that with the State Department. Those were big issues we had because we didn't have name tags or certificate of completions. You no longer have to worry about that. As long as you have that agenda for attending a conference, then you're going to be fine for that. Okay, so really look at these and make sure you're submitting the right type of documentation. I wanted to also tell you we did add one area, and I'm trying to remember which area it was. There was something we had left off under payroll, and now I can't remember what it was. But when you click on the document, it'll take you to the updated, or excuse me, click on the link, it'll take you to the updated document. All right, so it's a document that is going to be added to as we see any other types of submissions. Okay, any questions or celebrations? Do we have any smiley faces? Are you guys excited about some of the things happening so far?
Tamika says, where's the Smart Fusion number found? And I think I don't know. I'm not sure if you can answer that.
Yes, I think I can. My first answer is going to be talk to your finance department, because when they enter something into Smart Fusion, there's a number that's attached to it, that journal entry number. And so your finance department should know what that is. If they don't, they can contact Nick in our finance office, Nick Michael, and he'll be able to help you locate that Smart Fusion number.
Okay, and Miss Marine says, have the school bookkeepers been trained in these new forms?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Our finance department sent out invitations to the school leaders and asked for a list of those folks who needed to attend the financial boot camp last week. So you would have to check with your school leader to find out whether or not they attended the boot camp. And the good news is that those boot camps were recorded. I'll show you where to find those when we get to our website page. I'll kind of maneuver through some of that for you. And so all the recordings are available online for you to view. So you can always go back and train them if needed. And the reason for that is that we have, all of our schools do different things. I mean, in some of my schools, I have the coordinators who upload all of the documentation to Smart Fusion, to Epicenter. In other schools, it might be the school leader. In other schools, it might be the finance director. And in some schools, it may be a bookkeeper, an assistant. So whomever that is that does that, it's the school leader's responsibility or the coordinator's responsibility to make them aware of what's happening and what these new changes are, and go back and ensure they have the training they need. And again, we have those resources available for you to be able to just share with them so they'll know what to do. Hope that helps. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to jump right into the McKinney-Vento and homeless requests for funds. So as you know, McKinney-Vento is the federal program that works with our homeless students. We do not receive any additional funding through McKinney-Vento, but we do receive, or we receive Title I funds. And as part of our Title I application, we have to set aside homeless funds, and those will be for any homeless student throughout the district, regardless of whether they are in a Title I school or not. So let's take a look at what it means to be homeless. The term homeless children and youth means individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So that includes all of our children and youth who are sharing the housing of other persons due to loss of housing or economic hardships or some other similar reason. These are typically, we think about our homeless students as those living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, campgrounds, and so forth, because they don't have an alternative adequate accommodation. Or maybe they're living in emergency or transitional shelters, or maybe they're abandoned in hospitals. That doesn't really fit with a lot of our students because they're not babies, but this is the definition there. So, but we also don't always think about some of these other areas, children and youth who have a primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place, not designed for an ordinary or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. That's usually what we think of when we think of homeless, but that's not the only way a student can be identified as homeless. This number one here is one that we don't always think about. When our family first moved back to Anderson, we lived away from Anderson. Anderson's our home, but we lived away from Anderson for about 6 years due to other jobs. And while we were waiting to find a location, we didn't have adequate housing because we had sold our house, and we were waiting to find adequate housing where we could live. We lived with my mother for a little while. And so technically my kids could have been considered homeless because we were sharing the housing of another person. Children and youth who are living in cars and so forth, those are pretty self-explanatory, but then also migratory children who qualify as homeless because they fit one of these categories above. So again, I mentioned to you that we do have Title I district set-asides for homeless, and that funding can be used for any eligible homeless student. They do not have to be in a Title I school. So here's the process. It's a little different because most of our federal funds are allocated to each of our schools for some reason. These are not allocated out to you because obviously we don't know what your homeless needs might be at the beginning of a school year. So this is set aside in the district funds for Title I. And if you find that a student is identified as homeless, that's step one. The school must identify the student as homeless based on those categories I just shared with you. Then you're going to need to assess the student's educational needs. What is it that this particular homeless student needs in order to continue to be successful and meet the state standards? The third step is to determine if any other funds or services are available from any other public or private sources. So in other words, you're thinking about, do we have any local resources that can help with whatever this particular educational need is? And then once those have been exhausted, and if those are not available, then we can use the district set aside for homeless in the Title I plan. So there is a form that you can use, and here's the link for it. So once you receive this, you'll have a direct link to take you there. And once you have gone through these first 3 steps, you can submit this homeless funds request form in Epicenter. It's located under other federal and state grants, and the title is McKinney-Vento Homeless Request for Funding. This document is on the next page. I'm just showing you what it looks like here, but it helps you to kind of go through the process. How was the student identified as homeless? And you would check which of those categories fit this student. So that would show that you as a school properly identified the student as being homeless. And then you would also have to describe how the requested service is reasonable and necessary to assist the student in taking advantage of those educational opportunities. You know that our favorite words in federal programs are reasonable and necessary. So in other words, why does the student need this to be successful? And again, here you have to click here in this box to let us know what other funds and services that might be available. If there were none available, then you could let us know that, you may have a little sentence or two here that says that the school reached out to such and such and those funds were, not available for that. And then the fourth section lets us know what type of funds are needed. So let's say that the student needs clothing to meet the necessary dress or uniform requirements. So you would check this box, and then you would basically write an activity similar to what you do for any of your applications for federal programs, where you tell us exactly what it is that you're purchasing for the student and you give us details. Here's an example. If it was clothing, you told us exactly what you were buying, how much it was going to be, and so forth. We've had folks submit funding requests for internet service. I know we've had a lot of ESSER funds and things like that helping with that. But that was an example of something in the past year that was needed. And so it was a little more detailed because it wasn't just going to be access for, a one-time, 1 month thing. They had to calculate what what's the period of time that the student needs it and how much is it going to cost over that period of time. Okay. If you have particular questions about this, feel free to call me as you're filling it out, and I'll help talk you through it. Again, you're going to have signatures from your McKinney-Vento or Title I coordinator. In most cases, if you're a Title I school, your Title I coordinator can sign it, or if you are in a school that's not a Title I school, then it may be a McKinney-Vento contact, which in a lot of cases is a guidance counselor. We also need your school leader's signature. So this first one here is going to be the person who identified the needs. The person who says, hey, there's a homeless student. This is what the student needs. We've looked at all other sources. We can't find funding for this. Can we use the Title I homeless funds for this student? And then, of course, your school leader. And then you will submit this in Epicenter so that it will come to my queue. And you're going to submit this so that I can put my signature on it and send it back to you. So once I have approved it, I will send it back to you. And let me go back up a few pages to step 5. So that was step 4. Step 5 is the reimbursement. I noticed this year that we did have some schools that requested to use the Title I funding, but they never submitted it for reimbursement. So make sure, don't forget this step. After the school has already paid for the services, you would seek reimbursement in the same way that you do for all the other programs. The difference is going to be that you're going to have to attach the form that was signed by those 3 people. So that tells me or whomever's looking at it, it could be Takia, it might be someone else in our federal programs department, but then also finance that this was pre-approved, because we don't obviously have a pre-approved application other than that district set aside for homeless. So this breaks it down, and you would submit the cover sheet, the approved homeless request form, and on that cover sheet, you would copy and paste whatever that activity was that you had in that homeless request form. And then, of course, all of the supporting documentation, such as an invoice, proof of payment, etc. All right. Let me go back up just 1 second. Do you have any questions about that homeless request form?
Just one, looks like. Are foster children considered homeless?
No, they are not. That's a whole nother webinar. Foster care is definitely an area that's near and dear to my heart. When I was at the State Department, I was the state's foster care liaison when all of the changes occurred through ESSA. Got ESSA and ESSA on my brain. And so that I will share with you where to find all those resources in case you need any of it before we discuss that, but that's going to be on one of our monthly chats. So if you have a student that is foster care or comes into your school or transfers, let me know. because there are some very special things we have to do for those students, such as what's called a bid, which is a best interest determination, and so forth. So if you have a situation with a foster care student, contact me. I'm your liaison for that, and I will help walk you through that process. I hope that answered your question. All of your students who are homeless or foster care do receive free and reduced lunch, though, so you need to make sure you mark them accordingly in Power School. Okay. All right, I wanted to add this particular slide because we did receive some information from the State Department regarding the heightened risk of abuse and neglect for students. So this is part of that mandatory reporting. As educators, we are all required to report any abuse that we've seen. So there is a link here that you can access if you see any suspected child abuse and neglect. There's this link here. There's a number at the bottom, but this link is going to take you to some of the child protection risks that have been observed in this current COVID-19 pandemic, and some potential risks that have been observed in previous infectious disease outbreaks. So it's a document that was created by the University of South Carolina Children's Law Center and also DSS. So that might be helpful to some of your folks who are working directly with students. I know it's a little harder during virtual learning to sometimes notice some of the things that might be happening, but this is just a reminder. I put it under homeless because it was sent to us by our state contact for homeless children. Okay, here are some of your McKinney-Vento resources. All of these are on our website. I'm going to show you that website soon. But if you need the request form, that's located on our website. If you need help determining eligibility, there are some documents there that will help you with that and help you in identifying children and youth in homeless situations. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know. So there's some resources there that can help as you talk to your teachers and your staff about identifying students who may be homeless. There's potential warning signs of homeless, and then lots of other resources that will be helpful to you there. And we will probably dig into this a little more as we see a need for more training for our staff. But in the meantime, if you have questions, just let me know. All right, any additional questions? Takia, do we have anything or comments?
No, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, amendments. We have a new amendment form, and Christy, I hope you're online. Christy Papala was our first person to test it out for me. She already had to do an amendment, kind of an emergency amendment. So I said, can you be my guinea pig and test out our new form? I think this form is going to really help you. Last year, I noticed when we used the budget amendment form that the State Department had asked us to use, it was really confusing for a lot of people. So in this particular form, it's broken down a little bit better. So let me go back up. Amendment due dates. You have 3 opportunities this year to submit amendments. Now, I want you to keep in mind, if you have an emergency situation that comes up and it doesn't fit within the amendment due dates, let me know, because we can submit amendments at other times, but I just want you to understand it's a very lengthy process. Especially if you're amending the ESSER plan. I'm still working with the State Department because they don't use the same type of application that we use for our other federal programs. I really wish they did, because the amendment document is not my friend, I should say. It's very complicated. It doesn't total like it's supposed to, and it's been my nemesis this week. But anyway, there is a process that we have to go through for amendments. So the amendments come to me for review. In most cases, I have to submit those and changes in Epicenter. Not Epicenter. You submit them through Epicenter. I submit the changes in GEMS, which is our grants electronic management system at the State Department. That's how we communicate with the State Department with our applications. And then it has to go through 2 more steps before it makes it to the State Department. So it has to be reviewed by our finance team, and then it goes to our superintendent, who has to submit it. And then it goes, at that point, our program manager at the State Department will review it and let us know if those amendments are approved. And if they are, then we have to submit in another program called GAPS, which is where the money flow is. So our finance team then has to go in and make changes to the actual budget in GAPS. So it is a very lengthy process, which is why I wanted to give you 3 opportunities instead of just submitting them kind of haphazardly throughout the year, so that I could submit everyone's at the same time instead of having a bunch of separate ones. So the first due date is September 15th, and you can submit, you'll be able to find this form on the website, and you can just go in and add the information and submit it in Epicenter. One thing I want you to be sure of is to indicate the correct fiscal year of the grant. So in 2 places, you're going to be checking for the year of the grant. You can submit it here or type it in here under fiscal year of the grant. And then when you type into or upload it into Epicenter, there's a place for you to submit the year. Please keep in mind that whatever you put here on this form is what you check in Epicenter. So even though we're in the 2021 school year, you may be submitting an FY19 amendment change. You may have money left in your 19 plan. So if this has FY19, then what you choose in Epicenter is going to be 18-19 school year. Okay, so the things that changed on this budget amendment form, number 1, it's an Excel file, which is a little easier to work with. And it also has an example here. So you can see I did an example. It has the current activity copied from the approved plan. So everything you see here in pink has to do with the current plan, what it looks like now. So here's the function and object code for this activity. This is the original amount. So originally this activity was $65,000. The amount that this school wants to move is $20,000, which is going to reduce this activity down to $45,000. This is where a lot of the confusion came in last year. We didn't have these 2 columns. The only column we had was the amount of money you wanted to move, and that got a little confusing for folks because they wanted to put in this $6,500, they wanted to put in this $4,500, but they didn't know where to put it. So I added a column for you. Everything that you see here in green is going to indicate the new activity or what the changes might be. So notice in this particular activity, originally there was an activity to hire a math coach. So the first column here was why they needed to change it. In this example, the math coach salary was less than expected. So they had that $20,000 you see here left over. So they want to move those remaining funds to an existing activity to add an intervention assistant. So this helps justify, why am I moving this money? I had money left over, so I'm going to add another interventionist to an activity they've already approved. So notice here, this is really helpful to note your changes in red. So originally there were 2 1.0 FT intervention assistants, and they marked out the 2 and put 3 there, and they added this additional salary. So this basically is what the original approved activity looked like, and they're moving $20,000. See, it's green. It'll all pop up in different colors for you on the spreadsheet too. It was a 100. The original cost was $41,200. They added $20,000. They're wanting to add $20,000 to it, which will make it $61,200. So Christy said this was much easier to use. So thanks, Christy, for being my guinea pig. I hope this will help to make this process a little easier for you, because it can get very complicated. All right. Any questions about the amendments?
No, ma'am.
You guys are speeding through today. Okay, the 5th day counts. I wanted to just throw this in here to remind you that 5th day counts are going to need to be entered into Power School by September 25th. I did put a question mark here because I'm working with Dawn. We just found out that, let's see, Vashanta, most of you know Vashanta, who works with Dawn as well. And Vashanta was letting me know that someone had sent her an email or some kind of documentation to say that those 5th day counts needed to be pulled on day 9. I'm still gathering information about that, so I had to change this just a little bit. But the important thing that you need to know is that you need to make sure that whomever handles Power School in your school and handles the enrollment and the free and reduced lunch counts, all of that needs to be updated by, right now I'm saying September 25th. I hope that'll still give us plenty of time to be able to pull the either 5th or 9th day, depending on what they're telling us to pull. Make sure your 5th and 9th days are accurate, because this is used for eligibility. So if your 5th day enrollment counts, if they're not accurate in PowerSchool, then you may not get the results that you want. So it's very, very important to enter those 5th day enrollment counts. Make sure they're accurate. Make sure that all of your students who need to be marked as free or reduced lunch are marked appropriately, because that is how we determine eligibility for programs such as Title I, grants such as Title I and Title IV. Some of you may have questions regarding the alternative household income form. I have links to the alternative household income form and also the guidelines for that on our website that I will show you. And you can use that particular document if you're not a part of the National School Lunch Program and you can't use those free and reduced lunch forms that are required under the free and reduced lunch program. Okay, so again, many of you are using household income forms instead of the free and reduced lunch forms, and that's perfectly okay, but you need to make sure that PowerSchool is updated with those accurately. Questions about that?
Yes, ma'am.
I knew we'd have questions about this.
Ms. Jacqueline Jamison, what if all students are receiving free lunch?
Some of you are part of CEP schools, and we gather that information from the State Department of Education, so you don't have to worry about it. Some schools that are CEP choose to send out that alternative household income form because it does give them information if students need a reduced fee for supplies and materials, or maybe students that would qualify as free lunch. Maybe you have a program where the school assists those students with field trips. So that would be a way to help you determine which students would fall under free and reduced lunch if the school participated in that. So again, some folks use that criteria of free and reduced lunch to offer other programs or other services to students. So you're welcome to still send those forms out if you need to use them for other purposes. If you're a CEP school, though, you do not have to send that out because we get all of your documentation and the numbers from the State Department directly for eligibility for programs. Okay, good question.
Okay, and Miss Michelle Bishop, she says, for Title I, is that not based on poverty?
Okay, that's a great question. That's where I figured most of our questions would come from. So let me explain how we determine eligibility for Title I, which if you're Title I, you're usually also Title IV and receive Title IV funds. So there are several ways that poverty can be determined. One is going to be through your PIP numbers. Those PIP numbers, they have other things included in them other than just free and reduced lunch. They take into account foster care, homeless, Medicaid, all of those types of things. So there's a long list of things that are included to get your PIP percentage, which, to be honest, may be a more accurate percentage of your students in poverty. Unfortunately, we're not allowed, or not able, I just shouldn't say allowed, we are allowed to use PIP numbers, but our charter district, because we allow new schools the opportunity to receive funding their first year if they qualify, we don't have those PIP numbers for all of those schools at the beginning of the school year. So it gets very complicated. I've worked with our finance department and our leadership team, and we've talked a lot about this. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work out for our district to be able to use those percentages because we have to use those fifth day counts. Our traditional schools, traditional public schools, they use their fifth day counts and they don't add any schools. So they just continue to use those counts for when final allocations are released. We can't do that because we wouldn't have that information for the new schools. So we have to find an alternative method. So we use the mixed community eligibility, and then also free and reduced lunch that helps to determine eligibility. So eligibility for federal programs in our district is strictly based on your free and reduced lunch students. I hope that helps to kind of explain the difference. All schools at 40% or above are eligible for Title I services. Any school that's 75% or above must be served. And then a district is allowed to take a look at any other school between that 40th percentage up to that 75, under that 75 percentage, to determine how they want to serve those schools. Our philosophy has been, since I've been here, and I think it was the same before I came, was to serve all schools possible. I don't know if that'll change in the future as we have additional schools qualifying for Title I. We had 2 additional schools qualify this year. And of course, the more schools you have, the more spread out the money. You got to spread that money a little further if you have additional schools. But right now, the philosophy has been, as long as we have the funding to serve those schools and they can still have a quality Title I program, we want to try to serve as many students in poverty as possible. Any additional questions? Okay. All right. We'll keep going.
Hold on. I see one.
Okay.
So for us, the red-haired virtual child, are we free and reduced lunch only?
Who asked that question?
Miss Michelle Bishop.
Okay, Michelle, you're the redheaded stepchild, I think. Is that what you're referring to? No, virtual schools are counted the same. So as a virtual school, you can still send home that alternative household income form. We have, let's see, Michelle, remind me, I'm losing my train of thought. Which school is Michelle at?
South Carolina Whitmore.
Thank you, because I was going to say Whitmore, and I thought Michelle's at Whitmore. I know you guys already use that alternative household income form. So that helps, that determines what your poverty level is. I actually talked to John recently. John had called about something, and so I reminded him about those 5th day counts and those alternative household income forms. So you guys are already using that, and you're good to go. So no worries there. All right. Any other questions? All right. Okay. So for all of our schools except Title I, this is your opportunity to escape our chat. And I know you don't really want to because you're enjoying coffee and chit-chatting with us. So if you do have to hop off, you can do that. But I wanted to remind you that there is a survey link for you to complete. Our district has created an actual, a survey, a technical assistance survey, to give all of our schools at the end of our presentation, so that we can kind of compare the kinds of things we're doing and how we can do it better. So I would really love your feedback. So that's one thing, and I'll also send that link to you in an email. But before you leave, I do want to show you the website. So please don't leave me yet. We're almost there. But here are the resources and the contact information for myself and for Takia. A lot of the things that we've been talking about today, I put links here for you. But before you go, I want to escape out of this for a moment. And I want to show you our updated website. So I'm really proud. I spent a lot of time. There's still a lot to do, but I try to update our website weekly, and Takia's going to be helping with that coming up. So when you go to our district website and go to school resources and then go to federal programs, this is where it takes you, okay, to federal and state programs. There are links here for the CARES Act, ESSER funds, Title I, II, III, IV, Kate, special education, McKinney-Vento. And then I recently added all of these links on this page so that you would not have to go into the individual programs pages to find them. So you're going to see when you click here for federal programs. You know what? I just realized something. Can you all see my screen with the website?
No.
Oh, thank you, Takia. Let me move it over to my other screen. All right. I was just chatting along and no one stopped me. So let me go back again. Okay. So when you do go to our main website and then go into school resources, federal programs, it takes you to this particular site where you can see all of these additional links. So specifically Title I or Title II and so forth. But then I added all of these links at the toward the bottom so that you could access them quickly. You can see here's Coffee Chats with Tracy. The PowerPoint is already there. And once we are finished, I will add the recording there so that you can share it with anyone who may need it. I've also, let me go back. The federal programs monitoring and support that we talked about, there's a direct link there for you so you can see all of the monitoring forms. You can see the district federal program monitoring and support document that I showed you earlier. And this is the link under school resources for that federal epicenter submission that's due from school. So that document I know you're all excited about, this is where you will find that under federal programs monitoring, because most of those are documents that we have to collect through the monitoring process. Okay, let me go back, show you something else. All right, federal grants reimbursement. This is a great link for your bookkeepers, your finance office, and any of you who are working directly with reimbursement. So you'll see this is the new federal programs cover sheet. So you can just click on that and there you have it. These are the boot camp slides for the federal programs that we had last week. And here are the 3 recordings. So you can see day 1, 2, and 3 there. This is a website, excuse me, a web link to the webinar that we had on the old cover sheet. So these are some old documents there. You would want to focus on the newer ones. Also, if you're having issues locating things in Epicenter, we've got 2 documents here, one how to upload documents and one how to locate the status of submissions after they have been submitted. And then here is that quick reference guide for submission type documentation that I shared with you earlier, that shows you the types of documentation that you need for each type of submission. And then we have lots of stuff on time and effort at the bottom that you can see there as well. Okay. So please use our links. They're really going to be helpful to you. Newsletters. Every month I will provide a federal programs newsletter for you, and you can click on this link to find it if you forget where you might have it in the email. And you can see there's some from last year as well, and then we've started links for this year. Let's see, what else did I say I wanted to show you? I think that's it. But if you our Title I schools specifically, if you click on Title I program, lots and lots of resources here. We have a Title I inventory page. We have the federal grants reimbursement. There's a link to that federal programs monitoring, the newsletters. You're going to have some more stuff under annual Title I after our meeting today. This is that link for foster care. When you click on that link, that one is actually going to take you to the State Department's foster care website. And I'll just go there now. And the reason I just wanted it to go here is because I actually worked with DSS when I was at the State Department to create all of this. So I didn't want to kind of recreate the wheel by putting each thing there, because everything you need is here. And if you contact me with a foster care question, we're going to go here to look for forms like the best interest determination form and so forth. All right, so let's go back to our website. Same thing with Title II. You're going to have a lot of resources there for Title II. I'll just show it to you very quickly. Stacy, did you know you were on our website? You're right in the middle of the top. All right, so you've got some information there for Title II as well. Let's see. Whoops, I didn't mean to go home. I meant to go. There we go. All right, so lots of stuff. The items that we talked about today regarding McKinney-Vento and homeless, all of that is here on this website as well. You've got lots of information. These are all of those areas that are considered where students are considered homeless. The mandated reporting that I talked about today, there is a link to that actual report. There are some parent resources, even one in Spanish, and school resources here. So lots of school resources. You've got your district Title I homeless funds request form. So that's the form you would use to upload to Epicenter if you have a need. And then lots of resources for you as you're working with your school leaders, counselors, coordinators, teachers in determining potential warning signs of homeless and so forth. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to our slideshow. All right, you should be able to see the contact info and resources. So before I move on to coffee chat with our Title I schools, do we have any questions? Maybe something I didn't address today that you're curious about? Maybe some feedback on how today's chat went?
I don't have anything, Tracy.
All right. Well, hopefully a lot of you will continue to stay with us. If not, thank you for joining us today. So let's jump into something that I am so super excited about. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I remember when I first came on board, well, actually before I came on board, I was in an interview with, I don't know, it felt like there were 1 million people on the team interviewing me, but I remember the superintendent asked me a question. Because I'd worked at the State Department with Title I, he said, have you seen any schools that have truly used their federal funds, such as Title I, to impact student achievement? He said, like, did they have this great activity that just really made the difference? And at that time, I could not think of a single activity that stood out in my mind to say, hey, this really had an impact on student achievement. I was able to share lots of ways in which schools were using parent and family engagement funds, because that was another area I focused on at the State Department. But at the district level at that time, I didn't know what the impact on student achievement was, so I could not actually answer that question. It was a great question, though, because many times we are searching for ideas like, that magic bullet, that miracle answer, something that we can spend our money on that's just going to make all the difference. And it's just not out there for everyone, because our schools are so different. Our students are different. And every group of students has individual needs. They have individual needs that may not work for other schools. So if you decide to do something in a particular activity, just because it works for you and has an impact on student achievement doesn't mean it's going to work for every school and have an impact on student achievement. So with that in mind, I want to share with you a particular goal that I have for this year for our schools. We want to find out what is happening in our schools through the use of federal funds that directly has an impact on student achievement. So what's the goal? The goal is, by the end of this school year, we want to develop a detailed report that outlines the impact of federal funds on student achievement during the 2021 school year. So I'm just focusing on our Title I schools this year. I kind of want to pilot this program. I think it's really going to help our schools as they plan for using federal funds in the future and determining whether or not they want to continue with funding certain activities, or if they want to look at some other ways in which they can impact student achievement. So why are we doing this? Number one, it's required. It's a compliance issue. So just to share a little background, when I did work at the State Department several years ago, and ESSA came about, the reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind Act, there was a great emphasis placed on looking at the impact of student achievement. We have not seen that really filter through the monitoring from the State Department yet, but we're going to. So I want to prepare you that whether you're a Title I school or not, this is something that's coming. We want to get a head start on it so that we're not blasted at the last minute. So it's going to be a compliance issue where the question's going to be asked, how did this particular activity have an impact on student achievement? So we're planning for it, we're spending the money. How do we know that it's actually making a difference? It's also going to help with effective planning. A lot of times when I worked at the State Department, I saw the exact same plans come through every single year. And so it's kind of one of those, well, this is the way we've always done it. We've always used Title I funds to purchase this. We're going to keep doing it. And so the question's going to come out, hey, you've been doing this for 5 years. Has it really made a difference? And how do you know? And so a lot of schools across the state, well, their answer to that question is, well, we don't know. We've just always done it. We don't know what type of impact it's had on student achievement. We haven't measured the impact on student achievement. And so that's something that's going to change. You're going to see that really changing in the future. You're going to see a lot of this information being used by schools to determine, how they really want to spend their federal funding. The ultimate result, though, the ultimate why is hopefully improved student achievement. That's the ultimate goal. So we want to find out, are the activities that we're spending federal funds on really improving student achievement, and how do we know? So how are we going to accomplish this goal? One, we're going to continue with our monthly coffee chats, and each chat will feature a component related to determining the impact of federal funds on student achievement. We're going to be asking our Title I schools to submit a mid-year impact statement. That's going to be due in January, and then an end-of-year impact statement that'll be due in May. So I don't want you to start panicking. I can almost see the looks on some of your faces right now. This is not going to be a difficult task. We're going to give you the tools that you need to be able to determine impact. I've actually introduced you to some of those tools already in the past 2 years. We just haven't required you to submit any of that documentation. We already have some schools that are doing some of this that I would love to have them share their methods and their tools that they're using. I'll go ahead and say I know Legacy started doing a lot of this with their school leaders during planning meetings, where they would look at each individual activity and look at the types of data that they had collected around that activity and make a decision on whether or not it had an impact on student achievement, and they would have their results listed there. So I know Virginia, Jenny Burrows has a document she's already started looking at. So I'm probably going to ask her to share that. I think she shared it once during one of our meetings last year, but I may ask her to share that again, because that's one way in which you can determine impact. So I'm really excited about this. I hope that you guys are going to be excited about it too, because by the end of the year, each of you are going to have a statement, something that you can share with all of your stakeholders, your parents, your board members, all of your teachers, everyone who is involved in student achievement. You're going to be able to tell them, okay, this is what we spent our federal funds on, and this is the impact it had. It might be that it had a negative impact, and that's okay, because that's going to help with planning in the future. But it may be that it had a very positive impact and it helped to increase student achievement, and you're going to be able to tell how. So this is going to be something that I'm really excited about this year, and I hope you guys are excited about it too. So how do we get started? That's probably your next question. So what do I do now? Now you can start by reviewing your Title I activities. Now we know that the Title I activities in your plan right now are preliminary. We will continue to have a final allocation. We'll get a final allocation from the State Department. I will release that to you all. We also have to go back through the whole eligibility process. So hopefully all of you that submitted a plan are still eligible based on your 5th day counts. And once we get those final allocations, you're going to be revising your activities that are in your FY21 plan. But for now, you can take a look at what's in your preliminary plan and start reviewing those activities. Step 2 is to determine what tool is needed to measure the impact of that activity on student achievement. And then obviously implement the use of that tool. So what does this mean? Let's do an activity together. This is an opportunity for you to type in, or you can unmute yourself and discuss. I would love for some of you to unmute yourself and discuss, because sometimes I feel like when we're on a virtual meeting, I'm just talking to myself. So I'd love to discuss with you. But let's look at this particular activity. This is an example from one of our schools. It's a real activity. I don't think I even changed anything in it. But this was an activity to provide support for math instruction. The school will send 2 teachers for professional development to the SCCTM conference in Greenville. So basically, this professional development would allow teachers to learn innovative teaching methods from leading math experts, and they're going to pay for registration, hotel, and all of those other travel items. So here's the discussion. What tools can be used to measure how this activity impacts student achievement? So unmute yourself, and let's share some ideas. If this were your school's activity and this, and you're trying to determine what am I going to use? How am I going to know if this had an impact on student achievement or not? What are some tools that we can actually use? And I'm going to exit out for a second so that I can actually type into this box. Who wants to share? And Takia, if we have any folks typing in, that you are welcome to tell me what they're saying. So I'm giving you some think time right now to just think about how are you going to measure whether or not this had an impact on student achievement?
See, benchmarks, common asset assessments.
So benchmark assessments. All right. So that's one tool we can use. So what types of benchmark assessments are we going to be using this year? Let's put some examples there.
Okay, standardized test scores.
All right, standardized as test scores. That may not be as readily available to us from last year since our state testing was not required for a lot of things, but if we have some results from the past, we might be able to use those. What are some other?
Mastery Connect, Map Star.
All right, STAR testing. Oops. What else? I think at this point we can put etc. there, right? All right, so we've got some, we have some tools that we may be purchasing. Now, these are some other tools that you might actually be paying for through federal programs that may kind of work together. So if we're looking at a professional development that involves math, so some teachers are going to go, they're going to learn some new innovative ways to teach math. Then they're going to come back and they're going to implement those into their teaching. They may even share some of that. A lot of times schools require teachers who go to professional development opportunities to come back and do like a teacher chat where they share what they've learned with other teachers who may also be interested in using those innovative techniques. So keep that in mind as well. What are some of the other tools that we might be able to use? Can we use anecdotal data? Anecdotal records?
You could also use the 4.0 rubric.
4.0 rubric, absolutely. Can you think of some others? What if the teacher comes back and shares this information at a teacher chat? Is there a tool that you could use to determine if what she shared had an impact on student learning? What about surveys? Could we survey some of those teachers to see if they've used some of the things that they learned from the teacher chat and find out how it impacted some of the learning in the classroom? Okay, so those are just a few. Now, if we're thinking about the types of evidence that needs to be collected, we always have to think about evidence in terms of federal programs and being able to document what we're doing and how do we know and being able to collect evidence. What are some pieces of evidence? In other words, what are some documents that you might need as evidence to show whether or not it had an impact on students' achievement? So we said benchmark assessment. So if you're using MAP, it might be those MAP scores, right? For like beginning, middle, and end of year MAP scores, right? That might be one thing. What else?
I got
The
master,
survey. Go ahead.
master reports.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again?
Mastery reports.
Okay, mastery report, the Mastery Connect reports, STAR testing reports. So if you use some of these, for example, if you use the STAR testing, then you're going to have the actual evidence from the program that gives you the results in math, right? Okay. And then like the survey results, if you do a survey of the teachers, then you would actually have those survey results. So this was just something, this only took us a few minutes to think about. This is something that you guys could go back and do with your school leaders, with your coordinators, with teachers, you know, your planning team, your federal programs planning team, to think about, okay, let's take a look at the activities we have planned for Title I. Let's take a look at what tools we could use to assess this particular activity. Now, we'll tell you, it gets a little tricky when you get into some of your activities and thinking about, wow, how am I going to assess whether this had an impact on student achievement? It's especially tricky when you look at parent and family engagement activities. So let's, you know, maybe you're providing refreshments to have a parent night and you're buying supplies and materials. You're going to feed them to come in for the parent night. How are you going to assess whether that parent night had an impact on student achievement? Well, some of your typical items are going to be standardized tests and things like that, but there are a million different reasons that that those particular scores may have increased. You know, how do you link that improvement to having that parent night? Like, why are you having those parent nights to begin with? So you have to kind of think outside the box. This is going to require a lot of deep diving to look at, okay, how did this really impact student achievement? And we always think about student achievement in terms of like these benchmark assessments and standardized testing and so forth. That's usually the first thing that pops into our mind. But what else is there? What other types of data can we collect to determine if it had an impact on student achievement? There's also things like not just surveys to your teachers, but parent surveys. Sometimes it's asking the right questions to get not necessarily the answers we want to hear, but to get the results we need to be able to move forward. And so some of those parent survey results could be evidence, you know, writing up a little summary. Type that here too, summary of parent surveys to determine, okay, here's the results from our parent night. You know, we asked the right questions to find out what type of impact this may have on them. And it may be you need to go back and ask those questions later. You know, maybe parents have gone back and implemented some of the things you shared during a parent night, and you want to survey those parents later to ask those specific questions. You know, we shared XYZ strategy. Have you used it? Did it change how your student works with homework, or, you know, whatever the case may be? All right, so I just wanted to share with you that's how we start. That's exactly how we start thinking about how we determine impact on student achievement. So that's all that we're going to talk about with student achievement today. Unless you have specific questions, I would love to answer your questions. I would also love to hear how you're feeling about this. So don't be afraid. We're all family. We're having a coffee chat, kind of informal. So please share with me, how do you feel about this type of project for this year? Excited about it? Takia, I don't think anyone wants to talk to me today. Any comments?
No.
Okay, well,
I'm excited.
Takia's excited. Yay! I think Takia's excited because we've been talking about this for quite some time, and I really am excited about this. So you don't have to share your feelings with me. If you do have some comments you would like to share with me via email, I would love to hear it. Again, I don't want you to think about, okay, this is another thing I have due each year. There are two things you're going to have due. One, I'm going to go back to that other slide so you can see it. One is going to be a mid-year impact statement in January, and then the end-of-year impact statement. So it really is simply a statement where you're going to be sharing. I don't know what it looks like yet. We're still in the process of developing what this statement could look like. To give you an example, some of you may decide, okay, I want it to look a certain way to share with our board members, and you can do that too. And then I will compile all of your statements into one to share with our all of our stakeholders, our district-wide stakeholders at the end of the year. So I'm excited about that. The mid-year impact statement is really going to be more of a, tell me what you're doing. Let's look at how what you've assessed so far with your activities. This is also a really good time to say, oh, you know what? I need some amendments. So as you're working through this, it also gives you a chance to look at your activities individually, look at how much you've spent on each activity, the funding amount you have left, whether it's having an impact on student achievement or not, and whether you want to do some amendments to do something differently. So that's the reason for the mid-year impact statement. And then we'll do, of course, a final end-of-year impact statement. So I hope you're excited about that, because it really is going to be able to give you some results. Okay, so let's move from that to our annual Title I meetings. You know, it's that time of year. Remember, there are basically two types of meetings that you have with parents. The annual Title I meeting is that meeting at the beginning of the school year where you share tons of information with your parents regarding Title I. Then in the spring, that's when you'll have your Title I planning meetings, which is usually a smaller select group of people on a planning team. And you're planning for the upcoming year, and you're making revisions to some of your parent-family engagement documents and things like that. But this time of the year is where you're actually sharing information with parents about the Title I program. A lot of folks like to do their annual Title I meetings in conjunction with other types of events. In the past, pre-COVID-19, a lot of our schools throughout the state would have some type of parenting event, and they would share the annual Title I information during that time, or perhaps back to school or something like that. So it is required, if you receive Title I funds, that you do an annual Title I meeting. So I included all of the agenda topics here. I also included these in the newsletter for you, because I know some of you are jumping on this right away and thinking about how they want to proceed with their meetings. And Hannah Keever, I think this would be a good time, if you're still on the line with us, to share some of the things that you wanted to do in response to the fact that a lot of our meetings are having to take place virtually now. So Hannah, are you still on the line with us?
I am. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for volunteering to share your ideas with us.
Of course. So we basically, we've done lots and lots of Zooms with our parents. So we were wondering if maybe they're a little zoomed out, for lack of a better word. So we discussed recording a video ahead of time, just to make sure that it says exactly what we want it to say and that we're covering all of the requirements. And then we'll send that out in our weekly parent email, along with other attachments such as the parent-family engagement policy and the compact, things that they already got at the beginning of the year, but just to include them one more time in case somebody didn't get them or didn't look over them yet. And then we'll also share a Google form. And so that will be how we take attendance, and that will give us our documentation for that. And that'll also be how we collect parent feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah Keever. Let's give it up. If we could do a virtual clap for Hannah from Spartanburg Prep. I appreciate you sharing that. So, yes, it's becoming a little more difficult these days to conduct these meetings. And yes, I think our parents may be a little zoomed out, or whatever type of program you're using. So we're looking for innovative ways to share this information. So I do want to just remind you that if you do something like what Hannah is going to do, which is a recording, and then she's going to put it out there in all of her social media and share it with parents, all of those things, so everyone has an opportunity to hear it. Make sure you're still keeping all of the required documentation for compliance issues. So remember to file your meeting notice. So always send out a notice. If it's a virtual meeting that you're having and you have parent participation, make sure you send out that meeting notice to let them know when the meeting is and that all parents have an opportunity to participate. Sign-in sheets are not required now that we're having virtual meetings, but I still think it's a really good idea to come up with a way to keep those sign-in sheets. Just like Hannah said, she's going to send out a Google form. And that's a good way to get some feedback from parents as well. So it might be that, you say, please fill this out if you attended our meeting today. We really want your feedback. And that could serve as a sign-in sheet as well. A lot of your virtual team meeting platforms have a way for folks to sign in. Like I have once we leave this meeting, I still have all of the chat box information that shows up to show me who joined us. So I'd let that serve as the sign-in sheet. I mentioned parent feedback. And then the one that everybody always forgets would be meeting minutes. So how do you do this meeting minutes if you do a recording in advance and then send it out to parents? So any ideas on how that might be handled? Or Hannah, maybe you've thought about how to handle that with your upcoming meeting.
Typically, we just do like a Word doc, and type everything out. So I was thinking of making more like a script of everything that we went over, and then also include any like slides or anything that I presented during the video.
Okay, so that's a great idea. That's definitely something to consider. And the other suggestion I would make is to make sure you include some of the parent feedback in your meeting minutes, because the State Department is going to want to see when they do an audit. They're going to want to see that your parents had an opportunity to give feedback, because that's a requirement, and then also what types of feedback they were given. So you could type in your minute meetings and share all of everything that you did, and then a summary of what those parent results are. And that's a requirement for some of your parent surveys as well. Whenever we get into the mid-year evaluation of your parent family engagement program, which is a requirement later that you have to meet, you're going to have to do those types of things anyway, and that's write up a summary of the results. That's one piece that's missing a lot. Schools will send out surveys, but then that's where it ends. They don't really do anything with the survey results. It's not shared. Changes aren't made. I know last year, let's see, Chase. I think Chase is still on the line with us. Chase, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to share a little bit about what you did last year? Is Chase still on the line? Chase, I see you pop up. Okay, so I know last year when I visited at Lead Academy, Chase was sharing some ways in which he took the surveys and shared the previous year's data and compared it to this year's parent data, and then he would have a summary underneath it. Chase, do you want to share anything about that, or share what type of impact that's had and how you use those survey results? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Yes, I'm so sorry to put you on the spot. You can decline if you want to.
No problem. When we do our parent surveys every year at the kind of midpoint of the year, we always share back out the results, what percentage of people answered certain questions, what questions they asked, what our plan is to address those issues, just so people see that we actually do something with it and there's transparency there. But also, we try to keep the questions as similar as possible from year to year, so we can show, like for example, if parents said, if 60% of parents said communication wasn't clear enough, and we indicated that that's something we would work on, well, the next year when we do that, we show the comparison between the two to show whether we actually improved on that or not. So it's been good for parents. I think it's increased our amount of participation in those surveys, because they see that it's actually going to be used and that we're going to track it. But I think it allows them to see how their answers compare. So like if they say we don't communicate enough, but 95% of people say we do. It might be a them issue and not a me issue. So it's good for them to see that not everybody agrees, because some people complain a lot and assume everybody else complains a lot, and that might not be the reality. So that's kind of how we use it. And I can share an example if anybody wants it.
I love that. Thank you for I would say volunteering, but I voluntold you, I guess. Thank you for sharing that information. I was really impressed by the documents that I saw when I visited the school and how you actually used the information to make changes. So you'll be able to see when you look at his results, based on the survey results from last year, we made this change, and now here are the new results. So, it's a way to use those parent surveys in a very meaningful way, and then be able to share with the stakeholders that their opinion, that their voice really does matter. So really great example. Thank you, Chase. All right, any other questions about annual Title I meetings? Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to our last topic, which is parent and family engagement. And this really simply is just a reminder of the notifications that you need to send home, because we're going to be collecting some of these later in the year. So make sure you go ahead and send home those homeschool compacts that you revised last year. Remember, in the spring is when you're having those planning meetings and you're looking at your homeschool compacts, you're looking at the checklist to make sure they have everything they're supposed to have. This is the time of the year where you take those revised final copies and you send them home to parents so that they can have access to them, and your parent and family engagement policy as well. If you go to our parent and family engagement policy, if you go to our parent and family engagement website under Title I, you'll see something, a great example from the district perspective of a parent and family engagement policy. I realized yesterday when I looked to see if it was there, that it needs to be updated as well, because I haven't updated it with all the new information. So I need to do that as well. Also, the parent's right to know statement must be included in the information you send home to parents. A procedure for processing parent suggestions. Don't forget about that. You have to actually have a written procedure or policy for how parents can make suggestions and how you go about processing those parent suggestions and the time period in which you will respond to those parent suggestions. And then number 5 is the letter to parents of students being taught by a non-certified teacher for more than 4 consecutive weeks. Again, that is the type of document that's going to be uploaded as needed. If you have any students being taught by a non-certified teacher, then and that's the teacher that's going to be their teacher for the year, because of course as charter schools we're allowed 25% that don't have to be certified, but you still have to send this letter home notifying those parents that the teacher's not certified in the area in which they're teaching. So once you send those home, then within 10 days of sending it home, you can upload a copy to Epicenter for our records. And one suggestion, I've seen a lot of our schools doing this. You can place those items like in your school's parent handbook so that everything's there all together and you remember to update it each year. So that's just a suggestion. All right, any questions about those documents that need to go home now? All right. Well, guys, we have 3 minutes to spare. Again, here's the contact information and your resource links that you'll have to access our website. Please don't forget to complete the survey. I'll send you a link via email along with the PowerPoint and recording of today's presentation. So it's really important to us to be able to monitor and adjust and change the way in which we support you. For me, it's very difficult to support you through virtual learning opportunities, I guess, as it is for a lot of folks who are people. That's not the right word. People. I lost my word there. Anyway, I like to see you. I like to talk to you. I like to interact with you, and that's hard sometimes. So I'm trying to make opportunities for you to share ideas like you did today. So thanks for that. And I really appreciate all of you joining us today. Do we have any final questions before we leave?
I have nothing.
All right. Feel free to type in some comments. Was this helpful? Did you enjoy our coffee chat today? Is there something I could improve upon to make it better for you? please let us know. We value your opinion. And I hope you all have an amazing year. I know we've been faced with lots of challenges, but if anyone is ready to rise to the occasion, it is you all. I'm so super proud of you all, and thank you for joining us today.